Hello and welcome to the Anfield Index Academy podcast, where we like to take a bit of a break from the stresses of first team action and look at the youth setup at Anfield instead. And today I'm joined by Academy expert Lewis Boer. How are we, Lewis?
Yeah, I'm not bad, thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, yes, same old, same old. But yeah, I guess the best place to start is obviously last week was the Accrington game. A couple of surprises. I mean, Rio and Gamoa started. I guess we have to start with him because I remember talking to you about a month ago about him, and he seems to have really kind of made his way into not necessarily first team plans, but obviously starting in an FA Cup game is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's not even played for under 21s yet in any capacity. He's not even been on the bench in that setup yet, and he did really well, to be honest. He's a player that does have his flaws at the moment, but I don't want to use the term better players, even though obviously they are. But I think with a more regimented system, with the principles more on lock in the first team. Um, That was one of his best performances of the season for the first team. So even at his own age group, he'd not really played at high level as that. He recycled the ball really well, showed a lot of maturity, which naturally you'd expect. Although I think that is a very brave player, and he's never going to be scared to run at his man. He's definitely more likely to share the attacking responsibility with those first team players, and I think it brought out the best in him. Um, we saw that, that there are other players for Accrington to worry about, so uh, he was getting triple marked early on in the game. But then you've got the likes of Diogo Jota, Darwin Núñez, who are still going to cause you damage. So he could be a lot more there's a lot more variation in his play um, against Accrington, and yeah, he did really well.
Yeah, there's so many times you'd see kind of a young player like shy away or maybe not have that kind of drive to beat players, but he was doing it non-stop, wasn't he? It was almost like not taking the mick, but some of the sharp turns and stuff was brilliant to watch. And how rare is it for somebody to not play for the under 21s and play for the first team? Is that something that happens very very often?
Um, at Liverpool, throughout my time of covering, I think what's been hammered home, it's been very much uh, it's you get the sense that it's supposed to be a meritocracy, so there's the sense of really like working your way through your ranks, taking each step at a time. So you're under 18s, under 21s, and first team. So it is rare in that sense. I'm sure that there'll have been a case, although I can't think of one off the top of my head at the moment.
Yeah, and yeah, just the performance. And there was other youngsters involved, wasn't there? I mean, Dance comes on and scores, and there's been a lot of speculation about him. I saw a report today that four Championship clubs are in for him on loan. Obviously Plymouth were after him in the summer, and obviously I don't know whether you've heard anything. But what's your thoughts on Dan's? Obviously, some people are calling for him to be involved in the first team like regularly, and then some people are saying a loan move's best. So where do you stand on that?
It's just a swagger that he carries himself with, isn't it?
Yeah.
It seems to be unfazed by anything that's in front of him. I think a lot of the Plymouth links in the summer were in that his agent is also the same agent as Wayne Rooney's, who's no
All right.
longer with the club. So I'm not too sure there'll be too much smoke there, and there are some maybe higher placed championship clubs who could probably place him into a better environment. It's a real tricky one, isn't it? Especially because Darwin Núñez is under a lot of scrutiny at the moment. Um, the 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 question is what's going to benefit the player and the team in the long run and the short term, and finding that balance. So Arnie Slot might well fancy him, but does he fancy him enough now to give him significant minutes that's going to aid his development? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We've heard that Slot's very cutthroat and he will play players that he rates. In his press conference today, Dan's was mentioned as an option. It doesn't seem as though he was about to thrust him into the limelight, ready to be given him first 2 minutes. He said that he's maybe an option maybe fourth choice, third choice. So for me, I would still send him out on loan and give him the minutes. We've seen a lot of players who are in the under 21 setup at the moment who probably should have gone on loan maybe 6 months, a year, 18 months earlier, and that window of opportunity for first team football's passed them by. I think that Dan's. I don't think he should become a case like that. I think he should go and get some championship football under his belt. But I've seen Wrexham are interested in him as well in some reports. I think that'd be a really interesting one. Um,
Yeah,
it goes without saying though, that loans can be difficult. We expect him to go out on loan and do well. It's not a given, but even even just significant minutes at playing men's football would be a definite positive. I look at a player like Louis Barry, who's doing really well
mhm,
this season. Just been recalled by Aston Villa. I don't know if he's found a new club yet, but his first couple of loans were really unconvincing up until this season, where he's just exploded. And I think it was those first two loans, even though they weren't too impressive in terms of the performances, that really standed him in good stead. And I just think Dan should go out and seize the opportunity.
yeah. I think that's where I'm at with it as well. And I know Jota's picked up another knock, hasn't he? So there's at the end of the window, if he does go, I think I'm not actually sure what the date for the Plymouth game is. The Plymouth game is in February, isn't it? I think
Mm.
I might be wrong on that because I was gonna say they might keep me around for that, but and all I can't remember the date of the game. So, but yeah, the four clubs interested in him. Interestingly, is Blackburn are one of the teams reportedly interested. Obviously, we saw Harvey Elliott go there and do really well. Stoke, obviously, Kumas is there right now. Preston, we saw the likes of Vandenberg go to. How important is it for a team? Is it, people always, this is kind of like sometimes paper talk, but this kind of phrase of like clubs trust in certain clubs with development, like how important are them past relationships in choosing the next club for a player like Dan's?
Well, those clubs are funny to be fair because do have a good relationship with all those clubs, especially Blackburn. So it's not just
Mm,
Elliot. In the past couple of seasons, we've had Morton there.
yeah,
Leighton Clarkson did have a spell there, although it didn't impress as much as some others. Um, and Owen Beck's there at the moment.
yeah,
And then with Preston, we said Calvin Ramsey there. Sepp
mm,
van den Berg had a loan spell there. Um, and obviously, these clubs are relatively local geographically, so it might make the transition a little bit easier. With Stoke, we've got Kumas there at the moment, and he's doing really well. Although slightly different experience, played under three different managers, but
yeah,
it's definitely important to um, have a number of clubs that you trust. We can even look to Scotland. Kilmarnock in the past 3 seasons have taken Luke Chambers, James Balagizi, and now they've got Calvin Ramsey on loan.
yeah,
So a lot of people do talk about the second club business when it comes to FSG, and I do think it would be
yeah,
important. It'd be something interesting. But there are a number of clubs Liverpool do have good relationships with in terms of that. But I understand the point people make in that regard. Um, it makes very smooth transition through the pipeline a lot easier. It's important, especially to have a good club at a good level, because the championship is it's ferocious, isn't it? If when
yeah.
a player's doing well in the championship, um, it's a great experience for the young players.
Yeah, and obviously the other team was Hull, who obviously had Carvalho on loan and Morton as well. And Hull were linked with another player who came on against Accrington, funnily enough, Tyler Morton, in the summer, weren't they? And that didn't go through because I'm pretty sure McConnell got injured. But again, I don't know whether you've heard anything or. But what do you think is going to happen with McConnell? Because that's kind of went a bit quiet as well.
Exactly the same as what I'd say about Jayden Dan's, um, in terms of going out, getting the minutes under your belt, just so that you have those minutes. Because for these lads as well, it's not about Liverpool really. It's just about themselves. This is their career, and like I say, we don't want the opportunity to pass them by. You can quickly work out what you need. get into the Championship. If it works, brilliant. You've got a good bank of work to show to other clubs to forge yourself out a good career. If it doesn't quite work, right, maybe let's take a step down next year and see where I can. We'll see where I can develop. I do like McConnell. I think he's a great
Yeah,
player. When he first broke through, it was as an under-16 player for the under-18s. I remember watching a game. I think it was against Stoke. He actually scored on his debut. But he's more of an attacking midfielder when he first broke through. Really reminded me of Frank Lampard in some ways.
mm,
Obviously, nowhere near as good as Frank Lampard,
yeah,
but just the way that he goes in the final third with his third man runs. He's a real emphasis of attacking play in his style, and we've seen him move a bit further back. We saw Klopp use him as um, at the base of midfield. It's really impressive to see, and I think that makes him a real useful player, um, or a good candidate to go out on loan for any suitors that are attracted in the different ways that you can use him, whether that be maybe a bit higher up as an 8, as a 6. Um, but he has largely impressed him a 6 in the last year or so. Um, Not afraid to get on the ball, and he's got a real good bit of steel about him. I think he goes under the radar really because was actually one of those signings what Liverpool make a 16 year the 15, 16 year olds got brought in as a first year scholar, although there were somewhat extraneous circumstances around that with I think Sunderland were in a bit of financial trouble at the time and they let a fair few young players go. I think we signed Lucas Stevenson at the same time, relatively
yeah,
close. I think Logan Pye might have went to Manchester United.
mm,
Luke Hewitson signed for us, but that's when we decided to get McConnell. But we did bring him in as a first year scholar with a lot of interest in him. And just to answer your question, I think again he should head out on loan. Um, but Liverpool, we are short in midfield areas.
yeah,
Um, But I think Slot has shown that I don't think that there are enough minutes on offer to for from a personal point of view for the player for it to be worthwhile for them to stick around. So I'd go and get probably with McConnell Championship, potentially League One loan. Yeah, I think he should.
yeah. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because I mean, when everyone's fit, and I know 9 times out of 10, not everyone is fit, but in the forward positions, one of Nunes and Chiesa isn't even making the bench. Never mind Dan's at the minute, and then in midfield, Tyler Morton's not even making the bench sometimes, who's presumably ahead of McConnell as well. So yeah, it would be a bit selfish to keep them around, in my opinion. You've got to kind of let them go and do the thing. And just while we're on loans as well, there's been a lot of speculation about Ben Doak, and I'm not going to ask you about this swap deal with Bournemouth or anything because I think that's all just paper talk. But these kind of links, the £30 million price tag being thrown. I mean, I remember speaking to you about a month ago, and the expectation was kind of that he'd be moved on in the summer, and there's talks of that maybe being brought forward. We don't know what's going to happen, but what these links really are a massive compliment to him, though, aren't they? Like the fact that people are talking and a £30 million price tag on him, it's just a compliment to himself and the club, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but without getting too confident, but there's no way he should be playing Championship football again next season. It will be in a top 5 league. Not that there's any links abroad, but um, he should be playing Premier League football next season. I think he's shown this season what a useful tool he can be. It's how it's not just it's how he pops up statistically, so and how clubs can then utilise that. So if he carries into the box, touches in the box, the intensity in his pressing. He's just having a really good season, and I think unfortunately I've harped on about him for the past 2 years on how good he is. I think we're at somewhat of a catch-22 really, where 30 million is a significant amount of money um, for a player of his age, for the price that we paid for him. And although in an ideal world, it would probably be within our best interest to keep him around as a squad player. Um, it probably would be about right for everybody if Doak was to move to another Premier League club. with maybe that's with a buyback clause, a sell-on fee. And I've harped on over the past 2 years is the best player in terms of performance that I've seen in the academy since Raheem Sterling. But for what he wants and what he needs right now or in the next year, I don't think Liverpool can offer that. But if he could, then brilliant. Um, but I don't. It's not looking likely at the moment with Chiesa, Salah. Um, Diaz's future's up in the air. Jota, Nunes. Um, but we'll see. Some things in football sound ludicrous without hindsight. At the time, the Chiesa signing at the price was a brilliant signing. But for his availability and the upside of Doak and how things have panned out, which we do have the benefit of looking at, it doesn't seem like the most sensible investment right now. Hopefully, Chiesa can play his part in the second half of the season. But for me, for his availability, for what we've seen so far, is it potentially worth blocking the pathway of Doak if we could look to offer him that? And I'm not so sure, but I do think it's come to a point anyways where Doak should probably join a team where he's really going to feel at home and yeah, where he can really kick on. And I do think he's a Premier League player.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I remember saying a month ago I would love to have him in around the squad. To be fair, but I get the reasons behind the loan and stuff. And just another question. It's a bit not to put you on the spot, and it's not really Liverpool related. It's just in general about academy football. It's this whole like PSR thing of like selling academy players or players that you've bought and brought through the ranks. Like, are you on that kind of the side of where like some of it's good for players because these players like for Chelsea are moving on and actually having a better career elsewhere, but then there's also the side of it where now it's so unlikely that you're going to have a homegrown talent come through and kind of stick at the club for his whole career, unless you're like a Trent Alexander-Arnold, which I mean, obviously he might be leaving, but unless you're that good, you're seeing it now with like Harvey Elliott, the amount of profit that we could make on Harvey Elliott. Now he's being tipped as a move. There's always kind of been that conversation about Curtis Jones as well. Like, what's your thoughts on this whole new PSR thing, kind of using like youth players as a way to get around the finances?
Yeah, it almost adds an extra layer of incentive to sell for these players. It seems like they've been used as pawns almost. We've seen a lot of players swap for similar clubs. I think it was Amari Kellerman who went.
Yeah.
Well, I feel with where it's a transfer fee and a player as well. As long as the moves are in the best interest of the player. So the players in these situations do have to agree to
Yeah.
the transfer. However, it wouldn't be a surprise for a club to turn around and say, "Look, if you stay here, you're not going to get played." So, but maybe a transfer like 35, 40 million for Harvey Elliott doesn't look too appealing 2 or 3 years ago, but when
Yeah.
it's 35, 40 million pure profit on the books, it's attractive for clubs. But hopefully we can still see the homegrown players get brought through. For all the stick Chelsea get, they've brought a couple through this year. We've
Yeah.
seen Josh Pong get minutes in the last couple of weeks, who he was actually linked with, to be fair, tentatively. Um, Shinmuaka, who's a great player, made his debut. I think I saw that they've given debuts to 5 teenagers this season. So I do think that like the homegrown players, even just academy players in general, will always be here to play the part in terms of the introduction to the clubs.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, isn't it? It's kind of like a balancing act. But the, another question. This was from one of the viewers of the last podcast. We're asking what happened to Oakley Cannoneer, and some people might not really know the story behind that name. But if you want, you can explain the story. And they were asking where he's at and what's going on with him now.
Well, it's difficult to say where he's at right now. He has been on my team sheet this season, but it's been few and far between. It could be a case of just being managed. But for those who don't know, he was the famous ball boy who passed the ball to Trent for the corner taken quickly goal against Barcelona, and gained a bit of internet notoriety for that. Um, he's actually gone on to become a first year scholar. Um, teen age bracket, started well, injured, hamstring injury, I believe. Come back for the second half of the season. Again, did relatively well. Another injury. He absolutely exploded. He's a proper natural goal scoring instincts. He reminds me of a player who we might see in like an old school Serie A striker. Just a proper fox in the box. He's a tiny lad for a striker. Um, not too physically blessed. Although it's a superb runner. He's exceptionally quick. 42 goals in a season for the under 18s in his second year, and that put his name on in a lot of people's mouths in terms of his future development. And since then, he's unfortunately just fallen to injury as an under 21 player, and he's not really got the opportunity to get proper under 21 minutes under his belt. Um, so we'll see. We'll see how it develops. His game doesn't particularly, although he's a very quick player, his game doesn't particularly rely on pace. What was most impressive for me is I saw a lot of people when he had that exceptional season say how good of a finisher he was. He is a good finisher, don't get me wrong. But if you actually watch the games, he did miss a lot of chances, but it was his ability to constantly be in the right place at the right time. His blindsided movements, his anticipation of where the ball's going to drop in the box. It's a proper box striker, and that was his biggest asset for me. It was unclear whether he was going to properly break into the Liverpool first team. His all round game was decent. Great goal scorer, but his all round game was just decent. I'd have liked to have seen him, should he have been free of injury, maybe go abroad and take a chance there. But like I say, he has featured this season somewhat. He's been on the bench every now and then in the EFL Cup. He started against Manchester United. I think Talon Morton and Neone also started that game. Um, to say, especially in the case of players who do get injured more often than others, I think they're entitled to a degree of privacy, and I don't think we should know absolutely everything what's going on, especially at a younger age. So all you can say is hopefully we can see him for the second half of the season.
Spot on, and that's all the questions I've really got. The only thing I would ask is I'm always going to ask this: is there anyone to kind of watch out for, kind of going under the radar in the academy at the minute, or yeah, anyone like that?
So I've mentioned a few players in various things what I've done for the under 18s. You've got that layer of players who maybe people aren't quite aware of yet. I've given a lot of praise this season to DJ Esdale, Ollie O'Connor is midfielder, tall, gangly, technical midfielder, and then Joe Bradshaw. I always give a shout out to. I think a player that is in deserving of a mention is Claire Ewing. So he's a left back. He's also played in midfield this season. That missed an entire year of injury as in his first year as a scholar, to the point where he wasn't even allowed to train with his teammates. So essentially, this is his first proper season at under 18 level. So he had a bit of mystique when he was first introduced into the team. Wasn't expecting anything too outrageous or anything at all to have that length of time out injured, but he's really impressed this season. He's a real big lad. He's got a real strong build, tall, and he has played in midfield where you can see the way he carries the ball through the lines. That's really emphasised, and he has played left back more often. And in the UEFA Youth League this season, we've seen a lot of rotation in the back line, where maybe there's a few square pegs seen round holes, you'd say. We've seen the likes of Carter Pinnington play right back. We've seen players play left back. I think we've seen Davidson play left back. He's not a left back, and I understand the need to be careful with this player Ewan, and it's really difficult to gauge his proper ability with it being with him missing an entire year, playing against younger players, and maybe not testing himself at a slightly higher level. But he's a natural left back, and it would be good to see him get an opportunity there in the UEFA Youth League. We've got the game against Stuttgart coming up on the 11th of February. That's going to be a really difficult game. They played 6 games. They won 4 of them, drew 1, lost 1. And I think in the Bundesliga group, they've won something ridiculous like 14 out of 16 games and a second. I think Clay Ewing for his struggles last season and his performances this season is definitely worth of a shout out. That's not me saying that he's going to go on to play for Liverpool or anything like that, but I think he just deserves some recognition. And a player I keep forgetting to mention in these things is when people asked for players to watch out for is Cornell Miscua. Under 20, I have seen goalkeepers used very carefully over the past 4 years at Liverpool. For example, the first year scholar usually doesn't play too much in his first season. We don't often get players who play as a goalkeeper pushed up. But Miscua's pretty much the under 21 goalkeeper this season, and he's putting in the performances to prove that he deserves it. Really, he was signed from Hull City, and there was interest from a lot of other top clubs like Manchester City and Brighton, which is always a good sign. And he's still learning on the job. He's still working on his distribution. But for me, he's probably the best goalkeeping prospect we've seen for a little bit. Never really watched too much of Kelleher at the same level. But for out of the players that I've seen, Miscue is really impressive. And we've seen him travel with the first team squad on occasion, especially under Klopp. I think it goes to show that he's highly rated in the side. He's eligible for Poland as well, and I think he's a player to watch out for. He's got a real big frame, similar to Alisson. So I think even if it's not Liverpool, which will be very difficult to do at goalkeeping positions, always hard to break into. But I think he's going to have a good career. Cornell Miscua.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for those players. It sounds quite exciting. And just before we go, make sure to check out Lewis on Twitter as well. There's no one around that does the academy in as much detail as him, so definitely go and check that out and drop him a follow if you haven't already. But yeah, that is everything we've got to speak about today. So keep an eye out. I'm sure we'll bring another one of these in good time. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to talk about the academy again. So keep an eye out for the next podcast, and we'll see you in the next one.